Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Root of the Matter. I am your host, Dr. Rachel Carver, and today I'm really pleased to introduce you to Carlos Cintron, who is an author and founder of Reversible Beauty and Wellness. So he's going to talk to us all about his story, how he got into this. He's going to talk to us that we don't have to define aging as it was, as decline, that there's so much hope. We're going to talk about peptides and, all these new technologies that we can employ right away just to, enhance our vitality for as long as possible. So Carlos, thank you for coming on. Welcome. And again, tell us a little bit about your story, how you got into all this.
Well, Rachel, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to inspire your audience. Yeah, so how did I get involved in the whole regenerative space? I'll tell you a little bit of a story. First of all, the name of my book is called Aging is Inevitable, Getting Old is a Choice. I wrote that book. It's part memoir, part framework. And the whole idea was that I saw that, one, we're in the aging population. I'll give you a quick stat. By the year 2030, 1 in 6 people walking this planet will be 60 years and over. So this is global. And, a lot of us individuals, we've given into society's narrative of aging, right? Once we get to 50, we're going to decline. You're going to need knee replacement. All of this narrative that, unfortunately, people have bought into. And it has really given us the wrong sense of like what longevity and quality of life is all about, because we have control over all of that. And for me, it was all about, okay, sharing my story. I'll be transparent. I'm 63 years old. I actually turned 63 back in March, and I feel so youthful. I've not only from internally, but just the way I carry myself, because I think it's all about attitude, mindset. I created a framework on my book that really gives individuals basically a formula of how to really, age gracefully, right? And be someone with a great attitude, a great spirit. Because look, we're all, like I said, the book is called Aging is Inevitable. Getting old is a choice. So it's all about choices that we make that really age us and define us. And a lot of that has to do with just not giving into society's narrative of aging.
Anybody who's listening, if you check out the YouTube, you can see he could pass for 30 and he's got beautiful teeth too. So
Thank you.
so right, this book is really exciting. I really like. Why don't you kind of lay it out for us? Were you, when in earlier times, were you feeling really sick and tired and, did you pull yourself out of that?
Yeah. So, in my book, and I'll just kind of tap a little bit into the beginning of the book and why I created this book. First of all, both of my parents lived a long life. My father was 91 when he passed, and my mother, unfortunately, she passed 6 months after, mainly from heartbreak, which she died at age 83. And, I looked at them, and yes, they lived a long life, but the quality of life wasn't really there the last probably 10, 15 years of their life. And look, I look back and I say, I'm not trying to play God and say, look, I have all the answers. But in that era, health and wellness really wasn't, something that was people looked at, right? Today, there's no excuse. We live in an era where there's so much out there for us to just live quality of life and make the right choices, from nutrition to fitness to mindset. When I was young, I actually had a traumatic brain injury. At the age of 4, I was crossing the street with my mom, and my mom had a sister she's 13 months younger than me. And my mother had her in a stroller, had me in her arm. I broke away. I ran into a bus that was taking off from its stand, and I got hit by a bus. Luckily, it was taking off and it wasn't, going at a full rate of speed. Either way, I had a fractured skull, traumatic brain injury, and at that time, we're talking 1968. So back then, my parents, they really probably and look, I don't know the whole story. It's got diluted here and there, but I'm sure they really kind of probably got a little payoff from the city, the state, and I actually walked away with a traumatic brain injury, which later in life really took its toll because I started to really not really realize why I was having a hard time focusing. I was having a hard time, just like just managing life, even as in going through high school. And as I got older and I started to kind of reflect on my life, that traumatic brain injury, I started to notice that there was some issues going on, and I had needed to address it. And fast forward, I actually got into regenerative medicine, and I started to treat myself from utilizing a lot of the stem cells, exosomes. Started really looking at nutrition also, and I cured myself. And that's something that I basically take pride in because we have two choices, right? We can let it define us, or we can do something about it. And I chose the latter. I chose to really do something about it, and help me to have a better quality of life to today. And I wanted to also just kind of share in the book. I talk about the 5 elements of life. So I created this framework that I believe everyone should look into because we go into life and sometimes blindly we deal with circumstances. We tend to like just give in the status quo, and those 5 elements, I believe, when we talk about them, will ring a bell. And there's a reason why I got them in that order as well. So if you don't mind, I would love to chat about that.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I start off with the 5 elements, right? So element number 1 is spirituality. And why do I start off with spirituality? I feel that, look, there's religion and there's spirituality. I'm more spiritual than I am religious. I'm a Kabbalist. I've been studying Kabbalah over almost 2 years now. And, it's changed my life in a lot of ways. It's spiritual wisdom. But the reason that is as we age, there's a lot of things that happen when you get to, like, let's say age 50, 55. And that is called, we haven't made peace with mortality, right? And unfortunately, when we don't make peace with mortality, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of depression, there's a lot of, loss of hope, loss of faith. And I find when you are spiritual, even if you have religion, okay, but I call it spirituality, that gives you a connection to a higher source, right? It gives you faith, it gives you hope. You'll make peace with mortality. You're not falling into that depression where, you don't know. Obviously, a diagnosis comes along, and you're automatically thinking the worst. When you have spirituality and you have faith, you have a little better of a mindset. So that's why I start off with spirituality. Number 2 is mindset, and I believe mindset is also a biggie. And why do I say that? Is because our thoughts create our reality, right? And I'm a big meditator. I actually discovered Dr. Joe Dispenza back in, about 8 years ago, and I meditate every single day. It is, for me, been the most beautiful way to start my day. And, we all have this reactive behavior, right? We wake up in the morning, we're going through our routines, check our phone, we let those things define our day. But when you are in the right mindset, you start your day off with even breath work or meditation, just to tune in with your body and really take charge of your day rather than let the day take charge of you. So mindset for me is really important because, there is proof out there that your thoughts not only can make you sick, but your thoughts can make you healthy and well. And there's a lot of great studies out there on this. And I'm fascinated by the mind and really what it can do to the human body and when we're all aligned with our thoughts. So that's mindset is number 2. Number 3 is movement, which I call it movement. I didn't really want to say exercise because there's different types of movement. Some people like to do Pilates, some people like to do Tai Chi, some people like to go to the gym, jog. The bottom line is, as you're getting your heart rate up and you're doing some form of exercise. As we get older, we know that you lose body mass, sarcopenia, your joints, and all of that has to do with living a sedentary life of not moving and not being active. And there's a big study out there because, unfortunately, we are dealing with an obesity problem in our world. United States as being such a great country, we deal with the highest rate of obesity. And a lot of it is because people aren't exercising. They're not moving. They're not doing things that are keeping them active. So I do believe that is a very important part as you get older, because falling is the number one thing that happens for breaking a hip, getting fractures as you get older. So maintaining balance, all of that has to do with exercise, movement, whether you're taking a nice long walk, as I said, Tai Chi, salsa dancing, whatever it is that you do, just move, and those things you'll notice will take care of your body as you get older. The fourth element is nutrition, because we all know nutrition is everything. Unfortunately, as we get older, sometimes we'll need to deal with certain things like being pre-diabetic or diabetic, and it all has to do with choices of food. And I believe that, look, everybody can really maintain a good body mass index just by following your normal routine as far as the daily allowance of, vegetables, fruits, meats, proteins, fats. I like to, and I share this in my book, Dr. Carver, is I call it the somato body types. I don't know if you heard of the somato body types before. So we're three body types, right? Endomorph, ectomorph, and mesomorph. And those three body types, and something that I used when I was younger, is I was actually obese when I was a kid. And I discovered my body type, which is an endomorph. And I found it out because I became a bodybuilder later in life, was the Arnold Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia to Modern Bodybuilding. And I learned that I was an endomorph. And as soon as I started exercising, eating for my body type, I lost all the weight. My body composition changed. And to this day, I still follow that regimen. So look into those body types. If you pick up the book, you'll learn a little bit more about that. But yeah, nutrition is definitely one of the key areas of longevity and quality of life. And number 5 is functional medicine, which is my favorite subject. I've actually been involved in functional medicine, I should say regenerative medicine, over the last 8 years. That's how my company started. And I'm just fascinated by, modern medicine is obviously, we're dealing with different pharmaceutical companies that all they do is push pills. I would say, a pain for a pill, right? A pill for a pain. And if we look at a holistic approach, because there's some great, and I'm not saying that pharmaceuticals are bad, there's always a reason to use them, but it shouldn't be the first cause. So functional medicine is getting to the root cause of whatever your issue is and dealing with it on a holistic level. And that goes from lifestyle to, using peptides, nutraceuticals, and really looking at your body, not just from, the symptom is always there, but the root cause of what is it from that is giving you that migraine, or what is it that's giving you those gut health issues. So that's the 5 elements of life. And, I think most people are following one or two of them. And I do believe, and look, I'm not perfect. I have those in there to hold myself accountable as well. But I do believe those 5 elements of life are a great formula to really give you quality of life, health span, and lifespan.
And I would absolutely agree 110% with this, because, I think a lot of us in this space of, holistic, regenerative wellness, whatever you want to, title it, that we all have these kind of pillars of health, right, that we talk about. And what I love about yours, it puts that spirituality mindset at the forefront, which we've talked about that a lot on the podcast, and right, I'm a dentist. We're talking about like oral health, but again, all of this relates to every part of your health, So, may think, oh, it's not relevant. I want to hear more about, how these things impact my oral health. Everything impacts oral health, right? Everything impacts your health overall. Maybe your symptom is coming out in your mouth, right? Whereas my symptom came out as eczema in my hands. But until I really understood this spirituality and mindset part, I would make progress, but I couldn't quite get over the finish line, right? I couldn't get rid of the eczema for more than, a few weeks at a time. So again, I was making progress with the nutrition and then the movement and the functional medicine, but until I embraced the idea that we are all energy, right? That there is this greater source out there, that my mindset was preventing me, because I got to the point where I was like, I just need to find the right person or the right technology or the right supplement that's going to fix me, right? When what I really want to drive home, which we've talked about a lot, is that you have the capability to heal yourself, but you have to be open and you have to appreciate the power of the thoughts, the power of frequency in this world, because it's invisible. You can't feel it, touch it, taste it, smell it, right? So it's, some people, they're like, that's just so woo-woo. I do a lot of that neurofeedback, biofeedback kind of stuff, because I'm trying to tap into what is your frequency, right? What frequencies are your body giving off that may be inhibiting your body to fully heal itself? And the mindset, I love what you said, because I say that all the time on the podcast too, right? Thoughts become beliefs. Beliefs become reality. I try to drill that into my teenage daughters' heads like every single day. Like, I wish that high schools would teach, this kind of mindset, and they're starting to, but like, if they could get every teenager to create a mind movie, right? Hey, if you want to be a great athlete, well, create a movie, we've talked about vision boards, but when you have that actually, kids with technology today, make a little movie that you watch. And I think that was the other thing that's really important that this is kind of new for me to really working towards, is when you wake up in the morning, having that little daily routine, because we wake up and then we're immediately on our phones, or we're, getting breakfast, and we're going to work. And for me, meditation is always hard because it's hard for me to quiet my mind. But I love Qigong, right? Because I'm moving. So it helps quiet my mind a little bit as I move. But some of my good friends I'm doing a beta testing for their new app. And there's a million apps out there, but I love theirs because it's combining all of these pillars into one. And it's creating, like, I'm putting in my own values and what I want to achieve and blah, blah, blah. And then AI just creates for me, here's the affirmation, right, that you need to say. Here's the perfect meditation, right, for this. And, sometimes I'm not good at following these structured things, but I'm really loving it. And I'm feeling like this is really going to take me to the next level, right? Because I say, yeah, I want to do this, and I never really do it. I love to read, but sometimes that reading is an escape. Right? It's an escape from reality. So I don't have to deal with my thoughts and my feelings and the stresses. I just escape to another world. Right. And I see this in my teenage daughters. They just want to, watch a mindless show because it just shuts off the craziness. And not to say there's anything wrong, like, hey, if I want to go binge Bridgerton for an afternoon, what? Maybe that's what my body needs right now, right? To just slow down. But that the intentional affirmations, and we're not talking about that positive, the toxic positivity, right? Where you always have to be happy and, because we really need to feel our feelings, right? And that's part of that mindset. Like, okay, I feel tired. I feel stressed today. Okay. And when you're doing meditation stuff, you're sitting in that feeling, right? Because there's nothing wrong. We don't have wrong feelings. We have feelings. And I think we need to acknowledge them, not as bad or good, right? There's too much judgment, I think, in this world where, like, I'm not exercising enough, so I'm bad, I'm not doing this, and that's wrong. And we need to get rid of that judgment and just meet us where we're at and live in the present moment, right? I think too often we're like worried about the past, or we're worried about the future. And I mean, I'm totally guilty of this. So that's why I really like that morning, the time that you take 5 minutes. I'm going to set the intention for my day. And I know if I skip that Qigong, my office staff, they know. They're like, not as calm today. Things are spinning her a little bit easily. especially all of our nervous systems are such a wreck these days. There's so many invisible, man-made, toxins that's in the air, in the water, the Wi-Fi, la. Well, having that, I mean, and it doesn't have to be a lot, right? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it may be, that we set our day with the right, and you will notice in a massive difference. And suddenly life just seems easier because everything that you want just starts magically happening for you. But it's not magic. It's because you're putting the energy at the beginning of your day of what you want.
That's right.
And the universe has no alternative but to allow that to come to fruition, right? So
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And listen, I mean, I think we all have analytical minds, right? And at the beginning, when I first started meditating, I had a hard time just calming my brain down. But, I started off with 1 minute and then ended up 5 minutes. And then now I could do up to an hour of meditation. But the whole idea is to start your day off in stillness and silence. Keep that device away from you for the first hour. You don't have to check your emails and your text messages as soon as you wake up, because sometimes that just sets you off if it's the wrong message, or you're not happy with what you see. Just like, it just takes you in a whole different direction. And, I do believe that it's important for us to really just tune into our bodies, because we have a tendency to react, right? That's just human nature. We react. And by calming that reactive behavior and understanding that life is going to happen, and it's not what happens to you, it's how you react to what happens to you, right? And how long do you allow that reaction to happen? So it's just that I believe that really being aware, having that awareness and that clarity is everything. But everything that you just said, I'm so aligned with that. And look, I know that everybody that's going to be listening to this will get one nugget out of there. But if there's something that I feel can change your life, it's that morning routine.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then you made me think of something you said earlier too about that choice, right? And that is so important. And this is what I'm really trying to teach my kids, right? You have the choice to be the victim or to, be the leader of your own life, because you completely have a choice of how you want to live, right? And right now it's challenging for me, right? Because the teenagers, they're butting against everything that I want to say. They're telling them, what to eat, how to be, and for me, that's hard. I've had to learn how to just let it be for now and know that they're going to come back. I was very excited the other day. My daughter was out and she sent me a photo of herself. It was her bare feet on the ground. And she said, "I'm grounding." I just thought, oh, okay, it's getting in there. Okay. And I was like, oh, see, because when I get so frustrated, like they're not doing what I say. And then you're like, okay, so I'm laying the groundwork. And if I take the stress that everything needs to be perfect at this moment in time, it's never going to get there, right? Because that stress that I'm holding is preventing the free flow of energy, right? So that's the work in progress for me as a mom, to just, let it go, just have that faith and the belief that everything is going to work out, that they
100%.
are going to control, right?
Listen,
But
you're
it's
not
hard.
alone. I have a 16-year-old daughter, so I follow exactly what you're saying. It's definitely there.
Yeah.
What I love to do, doctor, is talk about, since we're on the subject right now of quality of life and how to live a life that is fulfilled. And one of the things that I believe, as we start to age, and even if you're like, I don't want to make this all about just getting older, because I'm into preventative and regenerative, right? So even if you're in your 40s, late 30s, I think it's a perfect time to start, because with my company, Reversible, one of the things that we do, because right now we're in this peptide craze, right? Everything's about peptides and nutraceuticals and regenerative medicine, and I love it. And it's a great opportunity to really understand what peptides are. So, peptides are signalers, right? They signal your cells, and they're basically a chain of amino acids, and they obviously are synthesized in a lab, and they are taken either orally or sub-Q. But there's a lot of great benefits to peptides, because as we get older, they diminish dramatically in our body. And these are great to signal to the cells to repair, regenerate. You know, they're great for all kinds of applications, whether it's cognitive, hormones, weight loss, uh, you know, sexual wellness. I mean, there's so much to do with peptides, but because
Just to interrupt for 1 second.
yeah,
So those of you who may not be familiar, like insulin, right, is a peptide. Ozempic, everybody's heard that.
sure,
That is a peptide.
yeah,
Okay.
those are all
Well,
peptides. Yeah,
yes. So just for context.
absolutely. And you know, the social media right now is all about peptides. My God, you go to Instagram, but it's like this world that's gone to the Wild West because now it's like one size fits all. Everybody wants to use peptides. There's a reason you want to use peptides. Look, I love peptides. I'm a walking billboard. I use peptides daily. But there's a reason I do it. And we start off with doing a genetic test or mitochondrial test because when you take anything, you want to know why you're taking it. Your body is, you're individual. You shouldn't be doing things that somebody else is doing. That's another subject because conformity kills. Uh,
Yes.
and if you take we have a genetic test that we have on our platform. And once you take that genetic test, it's based on 9 different health categories, right? So mom, dad, mutations, and you look at, you know, autophagy, vitamin minerals, cardiovascular, gut health, neurotransmitters. And once you get your results back, it'll tell you where all your deficiencies are. And once you notice those deficiencies that are your deficiencies, then there's a protocol that's customized specifically for you, for peptides, for nutraceuticals, for nutrition, for fitness, for lifestyle. And that is the actual formula that'll give you that quality of life, you know, that'll give you those, you know, you'll live into your 90s and hundreds, hopefully, because that's possible. And most people look at, that's another thing, look at the average lifespan. Oh, I'm only going to live till 77. That's nonsense. You're going to live as long as you want to live, but live in a way where you're having great health span because lifespan is how long you're going to live. Health span is how long you're going to live well. And that's what you
Yeah.
want. You want to have quality of life. So take a genetic test. I believe, and the lab that I'm affiliated with, you know, right now, genetic testing is a market that's growing exponentially because it is the blueprint for your life, for you as an individual. Unfortunately, doctor, guess what? Most people just don't want to know, which is irresponsible because, you know, it's irresponsible to your family, it's irresponsible to yourself. You know, you want to know, you know, and I'll give you an example. My mom, before she passed, she had Alzheimer's. And, you know, towards the end, she couldn't even recognize who I was, my name, and it was very difficult to see that. And so for me, that was a red flag. I wanted to find out, I mean, if that gene existed in my DNA. And it did after I get genetic tests. I found that out and I was able to take the right supplementation, the right, peptides to really mitigate that. And a lot of these, chronic diseases are reversible, hence the name of my
Yes.
company, but they are reversible, and it's all about catching them early. That's why, it's important. Even if you get them on a later stage, at least you can manage it, but don't neglect it. And I think that's really what most people are doing these days. They're just like doing what everybody else is doing. They're listening to social media. They're like, one size fits all. No, do a genetic test, customized blueprint for your body, and you're going to be amazed of the things that you will discover or might not discover. But if you do discover them, you could mitigate them early and live a beautiful quality of life.
It is so important that it can't reiterate that enough. And that's what's exciting about, the whole wellness world now is that we're moving more and more towards this personalized medicine. So, you said one of the pillars or the framework, right, is nutrition, but that's so different for all of us, right? And sometimes it makes it hard now that I know this, as a mom, I'm like, I can cook one meal for the four of us, but our nutrient requirements are a little bit different. But I find so much value in this genetic testing as well because I just had a blood test the other day, and my I've been losing a lot of my hair, and I was like, oh, geez, am I doing in this perimenopause? And I've been kind of tweaking my HRT regimen and trying to find the right balance. And my homocysteine was sky high.
Mm.
Never, it's never been high. And I'm heterozygous for MTHFR, the C one. And I was like, oh my gosh, for some reason, maybe I'm using up my B vitamins or I'm not getting enough. And so I was like, okay, I know I've got to get on that more B vitamins. Also, like my lipid levels were a little bit weird, but I have another defect where I don't absorb fats properly. And so again, I was like, I need that supplement that's going to help shuttle that in. I need extra bile salt, supplementation because again, like just my genetics don't allow me. I could have the healthiest diet and eat all the cod liver I want, but if my body isn't able to break it down and bring it into the cells, then it's kind of a waste. So there's so much value. Again, like, I did a Viome test years and years ago, right? That was looking at RNA stuff, and it showed for me, I shouldn't be eating any cruciferous vegetables. I didn't have the bacteria to break down the glucosinolates, which, right, broccoli and cabbage, those are supposed to be the healthiest vegetables on the planet. Well, not for me, right? And when I shifted my diet, that's again, which, I think is one of the reasons my eczema doesn't come back anymore. I don't eat a ton of those vegetables anymore. Right. So it's really, really, really vital. And it's so affordable.
Yes.
These are not crazy amounts of money. I mean, you can go to the doctor, health insurance now is such a joke. It's so terrible. Every time I have a doctor order me blood work, I mean, I'm spending thousands of dollars where, I'm fortunate that I'm a doctor. I can order my own for a fraction of the cost. But again, there are all these companies coming out now because consumers are like, I don't want to go that route. And so, and it can be much more affordable. So it's really exciting, that your company is offering that because again, that nutrition piece is, and I love what you said about the body types, right? And it's so important. Different body to like, I'm not eating the same thing as my husband. My husband has high iron. I have low iron, right? So again, it makes it a little more challenging at mealtime, but, for most of the time, it's really valuable if we want to, increase that health span, which I think most of us would want to do.
Yeah, look, the metabolic function of our bodies is different for each individual. And that's why I say conformity kills. And that's one of the things I talk about in my book is that unfortunately, most are just following what everybody else is doing. And, that is not the way you want to go about life. You're an individual. Your biology is completely different. The way you're going to be able to customize something and have a blueprint for your own body type is to do a genetic test. The other one is a mitochondrial test. As we know, mitochondria is the energy of our cells, right? But every organ in our body has mitochondria. And something that you kind of mentioned a minute ago, it's like the body is an unbelievable specimen. It'll show you and it'll tell you what's going on. We just got to listen, right? Most people ignore symptoms. They ignore things. Oh, I'm just having a little bit of a rash, or I'm just having a little bit of pain. It's okay, it'll go away. No, there's a reason. Your body's telling you something's wrong, something's going on. Listen to those early signs because that can save your life. I don't mean to be dramatic, but in some cases it can, but even like the little skin issue, I'll give you an example. I deal with a skin issue as well, that in the summertime, I was getting like this fungus on my skin. And I was like, what is this? I'd never had this before. So I went to a dermatologist and they diagnosed it as tinea versicolor, which is a fungus that grows on the skin. It's like, interesting. So what can I do about this? So it's like, oh, you got to take this medicated shampoo and body wash, whatever, and going away. But then as I started to get older, I started to notice that my skin was starting to get like different tones. And I'm like, wait a minute, is this part of aging? Did a little bit more research. There's a peptide called melatonin 2. And melatonin 2 is that. So it has obviously the skin melanin, right? So it actually I started to use it and my skin completely changed. I mean, I have healthy skin now. My skin tone is a lot more balanced. So again, there's peptides, there's different ways to really analyze really what's going on with you. You just got to listen to your body and be aware of any visual symptom that you might see or feel, because that's the body signaling to you that, hey, something is going on here.
Yeah. Inja, I was just listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about, osteoporosis, which was really, really common. I deal with it, see it in my practice all the time, and to me, I used to think it's like, a mineral issue. I used to think, that with women specifically, right, as we go through menopause, our estrogen levels drop, and estrogen is really protective of bone. So when we lose a little bit of estrogen, our bone may start breaking down. The other thing is, as our bone starts breaking down more, we're releasing decades old toxins,
Yes.
right? Which then speeds up that mitochondrial problem. And this podcast was talking about, osteoporosis, you got to look at the mitochondria. And makes complete sense, right? Mitochondria is what energy, but I never put it in that context before. So again, right, like after 40, we start losing a lot of our mitochondria and they're not as efficient, right? And our digestion isn't, everything isn't as efficient as it was. But knowing that, we're like, okay, how do we support it? How do we tell our body, hey, we're still 20, right? We need to replete the body with the nutrients, and the mitochondria is where it's all at, right? I mean, I would always say, I think the root of all disease, except the very small subset that are purely genetic, comes down to toxins, right? Whether they're infection toxins or extraneous toxins, because that affects the mitochondria. And then mitochondrial dysfunction leads to disease. And because we all have, different ethnicities or genetics, we may manifest disease differently, but at the cellular level, it's that mitochondria is not functioning, right? Because,
100%.
and that's why you're exhausted all the time, right? Most people, they're tired. Well, because we can't make energy.
100%.
So what is the test that you look at? How does that reflect mitochondrial
So
activity?
it is called a Me Screen. Me Screen is the name of the mitochondrial function test. We actually sell Me Screen on our platform. It's a blood drop. So they send you a card, you do a blood drop on it. Very easy. It's nothing that you do that's going to be scary. Taking a little bit of a Lancet, comes with it. Little drop in the blood goes out to the lab. They do a test, come back, and you do a complete. You log onto the website, and your actual report will be on there. And then there's an analysis that will go on there with you and run you through your protocol of what you need to do to get your mitochondria back to I should say balanced, right? To homeostasis. So yeah, no, that's a great point, because I said every organ in the body has mitochondria. And if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling, let's say cognitively, another thing that, the aging brain is real, right? So you need to really take care of that. Most of that is hydration. But, a lot of it is really looking at your mitochondria. And we have some great peptides that will help with that as well. SS31, MOTS-C are great mitochondrial peptides. And so there's a solution for everything. There's no need to go through life suffering. And I mean that, there's obviously certain situations that happen that are medically, they're just things that happen in life. But the majority of them can be reversed or can be, mitigated and addressed. But you need to know what it is. Don't wait to get sick, address
Exactly.
it before you get there. And that is easily done by taking a genetic test and a mitochondrial test.
Yeah, I mean, and we always say, right, it's so much easier to prevent than treat, but then it's hard when you're not necessarily feeling bad, to actually do the work. So again, that's why the genetic screening, the Me Screen, I've had that done as well. And it's so important, because again, yeah, if you want to age well, if you want to avoid all of the really nasty diagnoses or labels, as I like to call them, we need to be proactive. We need to know what's happening at that cellular level, because, sometimes we can go, my eczema was a huge, wake up like, hey, something's not right here. And I'm fortunate that it happened to me so young, so I could learn all these things, to try to be, proactive here. But let's talk a little bit more about the peptides. Do you see, like, peptide is usually they're natural, right? And do you see a lot of side effects, or does it depend on the peptide?
To be honest with you, there shouldn't be any adverse reactions, right? So it's an amino acid. Now, overuse can definitely be one of the, side effects that you'll get. When we talk about side effects, maybe a rash on the injection site, maybe swelling on the injection site. Sometimes people are allergic to certain, compounds like CJC. But for the most part, doctor, I have not seen really much of adverse reactions. And I take
Yeah.
probably a good 8 different peptides for
Yeah,
different,
that's great.
you know,
And I think the other thing that's important to notice about that, right? As we get older and if our digestion, isn't as robust, we see a lot of, diminishing stomach acid and those problems. Also, we see as we age, especially in women, right, we need more protein, right? And protein, amino acids is what builds protein. And that's why the peptides are so effective, because we're not absorbing our protein. We're not eating enough protein. And that's why it's one of the reasons I think we see that typical decline or the typical manifestations of aging, right? We're not getting those amino acids that we need. And that's why, and again, the routes of administration of peptides are really, unless you don't necessarily love giving yourself a shot, but there's certain ones, like BPC, KPV, they come in oral sprays, and now some of them, if they're small enough, right, they can be even taken orally sometimes. So there's so many different ways now that we can get these peptides. And again, they're just so beneficial. It's just, that missing link, right? Because those amino acids in the form that they are, as Carlos said, they are signalers. So they're telling your body, hey, we don't have enough of this in the tank here. Let's make some more of this, right?
that's right.
And that's what we need. And so, and again, understanding your genetics, you're like, okay, because there are so many peptides, that's where it gets confusing. If you list like all the things they help for, everyone would be like, I need all of them.
Yeah.
They have all those symptoms, right? So, so it's really important because, some you can order by yourself, but I think it's really important that you work with somebody who really understands how peptides work, because even though they may be relatively safe, if you want to get the biggest bang for your buck, work with somebody who understands your genetics, your mitochondrial functioning, and then how each individual peptide will benefit you personally. Because the fastest way to improve is to personalize your treatment as much as possible.
Well said. No, 100%. And look, there is definitely, and when you asked the question about side effects, every peptide has a cycle, right? So you use it for a cycle. You don't use peptides like forever, because what you want to do, for instance, you mentioned BPC 157, right? So you take BPC 157, if you had any past injuries or even for gut health, and you'll do it for that 1 month cycle. If you're seeing great results, and you will see results, then you pause for 2 months, and then if you see any symptoms come back, then you start again. But you allow your body to make them on their own. That's why cycling off and cycling on is very important. You don't want to just stay on them for forever. So I do cycle them, and I've seen some amazing results when it comes to, obviously the reasons that I'm using them. But yeah, I think there's peptides that are for the masses, 100%. Your GHK copper CU, obviously for skin, right? Everybody can use that. I don't see an issue with doing that. But when you get more in depth, like you're talking about, your hormonal, your cognitive, your mitochondrial, then definitely you want to do a genetic test or a mitochondrial test to see, really which ones would work best for you. And I always recommend functional medicine doctors really are the best when it comes to that, because they like to work with more homeopathic approach. So I highly recommend to go that route. Don't ever go and buy peptides on your own and start injecting, because one, it's the Wild West out there. Sorry to say, but sometimes these are coming from, China.
Yes,
there's the FDA, they're not FDA approved though. There's can be some adverse reactions if you don't have impurities in there that will cause any type of adverse.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would definitely caution that too, because you don't know where it's coming from. And that's I caution people, don't buy your vitamins off of Amazon, okay? Unless it's coming directly from that manufacturer. They've done studies that show, that they can be tampered with. So, when you're dealing with stuff for your body, especially if you're going to make that investment, you want to make sure you're using the proper brand and working with a doctor who's familiar, with the quality, right? You don't have to spend all your time. Let the doctors, do that groundwork for you,
You
right?
talked about supplements, and I want to talk about it because I'm a big fan of nutraceuticals. And,
Mhm.
obviously nutraceuticals are a combination of nutrients and pharmaceutical. Um, but, one of the best ways to really get the bang for the buck, if you will, from your supplements is make sure that they're liposomal. Liposomal is when they're encapsulated in a fatty encapsulation, right? So it's the actual set. They actually will bypass the gastric acid because most of the vitamins that you're taking, if they're pills form, they're getting eat up. You're probably getting maybe 10 to 20% of the bioavailability. When they are liposomal, they allow it to pass the gastric acid, and you're getting, 70 to 80% bioavailability and absorption rate. So I highly recommend, if you are going to take any supplements, nutraceuticals, vitamins, liposomal is the route.
I would agree with that. And the idea behind is because it's fat, Bob, it's going to absorb through the fatty
That's
membrane
right.
more easily. The other thing I would say too is not everything comes liposomal. So what do you do then? If you can find, that's why I'm a big fan of the Cellcore brand, because their carbon technology is also highly energized, right? So we talk about things, getting in and out of cells with all these voltage gated channels and everything. And again, everything in life is energy, everything is frequency. Cellcore has, they're charged, right? So they're going to more easily the same idea like liposomal. And so if you take, or if you just get fulvic acid, humic acid things, those are becoming more and more popular too. Those are also charged particles. So you can take, like I will sometimes use my Beam minerals. I'll take some of my supplements with the Beam, as long as the fulvic and humic acid that are charged, it helps to bring those again, because not everything's liposomal. So that's one other way to help get more out of your
Yep.
supplements. 100%.
Yep. And again, that's part of the protocol as well. When you do a genetic test, you'll get your vitamin and mineral deficiencies, because unfortunately we're not getting a lot of that source from our food because of the soil and so on and so forth. But yeah, you definitely need to supplement your nutrition, and that'll
Yeah.
be done through vitamins and minerals.
Right. Again, it's important to understand where your deficiencies are, so you're not wasting time and money,
That's right.
buying just supplements that you may not need. Or maybe it's the wrong form, right? Maybe you've been taking magnesium for 2 years and yet it's not ticking that number up. Well, you maybe need another form. You maybe need a different brand, or, something, because every brand, they may look the same on a label, but in the processing, in the manufacturing, in the shipping, who knows what happens to the energy, within those bottles, right? So, so it's important to look at that, because some people are like, well, it's okay, I'm taking my vitamin D and I'm taking this, and well, how do you know? Are you checking your vitamin D levels every? That's another thing for me. I have a defect in my vitamin D receptors, genetically. So I have to take a lot of vitamin. And for years, I was like, well, I'll just take my fish oil, or I'll just go out into the sun more. It just doesn't work for me. And there's some studies saying, oh, too much synthetic vitamin D may not be a good thing. But if I'm not getting any at all, right? Most of the majority of the studies say, yeah, you want those levels, over 40, maybe at 60, maybe at 80. So again, knowing your genetics, your blood work, that's how you really can optimize your health. And sometimes it may seem like daunting and expensive, but again, when you do these initial tests, see where you're at, right? Then you dial in the exact supplements you need. You don't maybe you were taking too many that you didn't need, right? So you were wasting money anyway, right? And then, working with certain doctors now, again, and there are a lot of tests that you can do at home that are so much less expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are avenues, because some people say, well, it's just too expensive, I can't do that. But again, what's your priority? Do you want to feel good? Do you want to have your energy back? That's where the mindset piece comes
Absolutely.
in, right? Like, who do you want to be, right? Do you want to be the victim, or do you want to be, the proactive, leader of your biology? So
your health is an investment, not a liability. And it's something that, unfortunately, if you don't take care of it, eventually it's going to come back to, haunt you. And that's something that you don't want later in life. I know we talk about my book, obviously, Aging is Edible, Getting Old is a Choice. And as we start to age, my thing is that I want everybody to understand that you're in control of that. You are in control of that. Yeah, God, the universe, however you want to call it, obviously has plans for all of us. I'm not trying to play God, but we all can take care of our own temple, our vessel, and really nourish it, make sure we exercise it, make sure we are, you know, inputting the right information, keeping our thoughts clean. And that is really what's going to give you quality of life, because that's what it's all about. Longevity is, everybody wants to live long, but I want to live long well. I don't want to live long, having a lot of ailments. So hopefully this information has helped, your viewers and your audience to really look at your health and take it seriously, because, we're only here one time. And you want to make it as beautiful. You have kids, you have family. Be responsible for them. Don't be selfish. And that's why I said it's irresponsible not to address your health issues or address your health, because others will suffer.
Yeah, very well said. Well, tell us how we can learn more about your company.
Absolutely,
and
yeah. So, my company actually right now, I'm actually moving it into starting my new website, which should be up in about 3 weeks. But it's www.reversible.com, and you'll go there and have access to the mitochondrial test, the me-screen test, all the information. I'm all about education, not about selling. I think consumers need to be educated these days. So we give you a complete education on those tests, as well as education on peptides, bioregulators, nutraceuticals, the 3 body types. We educate on there as well. So we have a health optimization quiz that you could take on there. A lot of great resources. So highly recommend. Go on there. Love to help you. I have a chief medical officer that does a lot of the protocols and can guide you. And we're just here to help humanity and to really help you have a great quality of life and give you all of the tools necessary for you to just have a great health span and lifespan.
That's awesome, and we'll put that website in the show notes for everybody, so you can reference that. But this has been wonderful. It's always nice having like minds come together and share our passion for education and helping others. Carlos, thank you so much for taking time today to enlighten all of us and energize all of us. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.
My pleasure.
So I hope everybody had got at least a few nuggets out of this episode. Again, refer to the show notes to learn more about Carlos's company, and we'll see you all on the next episode.